Welcome back. You're watching the program, and we are set to have the discussion that pertains the political way in regard to a referendum, the position of a Prime Minister, as was made before the BBI Steering Committee, and that's happening on the state of affairs here on New Day, Kenya. And before we get to our guests who are already on set, Honorable Farah Maalim, the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, Senator Samuel Pogishio, West Pokot County, and Professor Hezron Mugambi. Let's first of all hear from what Musalia Mudavadi said when he appeared, or when his party ANC made their submissions yesterday before the BBI Steering Committee here in Nairobi.
The IBC wanted to procure ICT services, but they were told to secure ICT facilities, you will have to go through the Ministry of ICT. If we indeed want to create independent institutions, like the IBC and a few others that are listed in the area that you mentioned, let us then give it a very critical view as Kenyan people, and see whether there was wisdom in having all of them there, or some need not be there. A little bit, was it Kimwerer Dam, as an example? They say 7 billion was lost, or thereabouts, or 8 billion. I can assure you, if you had given the judiciary 7 billion or 8 billion, by now they should have automated all their proceedings, so that we don't have to wait for all that time. Because justice delayed is justice denied. And this is where we're having even with corruption cases. They go in there and they are stuck. The Prime Minister coming from the President's party, or appointed by the President. I'm coming from the position that, do we want to have a democratic system that recognizes the opposition or not?
Okay, that is Musalia Mudavadi, the ANC party leader, speaking yesterday when he made the submissions of his party and appeared before the Building Bridges Initiative Steering Committee. Coming to you first, Senator Samuel Pogishio. And more or less it was about the mending of mission on mending the ties between Odinga and Kenyatta, but now the call for a referendum appears to be inevitable. Will it restore, and how will it perhaps entrench our democracy? And is it perhaps the end point to the protracted political crisis after every electoral cycle?
Well, thank you. Good morning. And I really wanted to jump in as I was listening to Mudavadi and his team, because I think he's got ideas which need to be included in the debate about, the IBC, about the executive prime minister position and so on. But this BBI is truly an initiative that must be taken very seriously. I see some people who don't want to take it seriously, but it is serious. The coming together of Uhuru Kenyatta and Raila Odinga is a serious matter. These are people who hitherto would not have come together in any way because of what we've done to our politics. And so in my view, even just the move to be together should be taken seriously, and nobody should think about it as a passing cloud or something that is temporary. I think that this is the determination. These two men have decided that they would take this thing to the very end. So it's a serious matter. It's no longer just a joke. It's not a matter of saying that it's probably going to end or change. And from there, we can now begin to see that it's important for all of us to consider this as a healing process for our country. Because after every election, we've had wounds which needed healing. And I believe that this is the best time to start thinking about it as a healing process for the country.
Okay, mentioning that, there is a lot, of course, development in regard to what we see as perhaps the point with which, coming to you, Professor Mugambi, the point with which the central assumption remains what appears to be ending the political crisis often after every electoral cycle. And even as the calls now gain momentum for the establishment of a parliamentary system of governance in the country, and as Mudavadi alluded, to have a prime minister with 2 deputies or a deputy and with specified roles as was not the case, which he said under the Grand Coalition or Mkate-Nusu government. Perhaps, do you see this as perhaps the point with which we can have the honest discussion and coalesce around a cause in the end, that in the sense that we are intent at ending our uncertain times after every political point?
Thank you very much, first of all, for this opportunity. Secondly, I think, as has been said before, I also want to re-emphasize that BBI actually offers the best opportunity for Kenya to re-energize and re-look back at the issues which have bedeviled the country since independence. If I can take you back, there have been claims that during independence, or at the time of independence, the constitution which was to be enacted was actually tampered with, and that the aspirations of the country as at that time were not taken over, in the subsequent years to up to now. And we have been having as a country missteps and issues and challenges since that time, through Kenyatta days and then Moi and then all that. So I think this is a time to reflect back and think about what challenges we have in terms of governance, in terms of corruption, in terms of bringing the country together, in terms of peace and all that. And I think I support what Senator is saying, that this offers the best platform. BB offers the best platform for the country to look back and have a honest discourse about what needs to be done, where and how. And I think what the NC leader was saying, or is saying, is that there are issues within the governance structure which needs to be looked at. And remember, one of those things which has been a perennial problem in the country is about the winner takes it all, and some regions. And we've been saying in this platform and this program that exclusion and people feeling that they are not part of the system is one of the major problems. And if BBI can come up with proposals, which of course will be from what Kenyans think can heal this country, so be it. So I think this is a very good initiative, which everybody should be ready to present their views. And in the end, we see whether, and I believe it will, in the end, come up with proposals which will then help to, the country to move forward than before.
Honorable Farah Maalim, you, of course, are championing for a parliamentary system of governance, and we had this discussion yesterday. But then the most important element here is, besides mending the ties, I'm talking about Kenyatta and Odinga, they need to equally talk about wholesomely the uncomfortable political truths in the country, the shortcomings of the political establishment, despite the tenacity, the need for apology by the political system in the country for failing since 1992 when we repealed Section 2A of the Constitution. But do you believe firmly that walking away from the presidential system of governance is a remedy to a political problem?
Indeed, yes. But we don't want to have any mongrel of a system. They say if two elephants fight, the grass suffers. But if two elephants make love equally, the grass also suffers. So we have two elephants who have gone into a handshake now, which can be equated to love making. They've gone into a handshake. And if the emphasis or the obsession at the back of their minds is their own relevance and validity, and rebirth of their own worth, then of course we're in trouble. I'm looking at a parliamentary system exactly the way a pure parliamentary system, in the sense that you have a ceremonial president who can be an academic, he's a don, he's somebody of repute, basically a kind of a unifying person, but with very limited executive powers. Other than receiving ambassadors and a few other and the tripping of colors when the military is going through these ceremonies, he will not have anything other than that. And receiving, of course, the prime minister, asking the one who has got the maximum number of members of parliament to go and form the next government. And if he doesn't have the absolute numbers, then of course he goes into a coalition. But the absence of a presidential election is precisely what is going to eliminate the chaos we have in the country now. Prime Minister will only be going, popularizing his own party all over the world, but at the same time going straight for his seat at the constituency level. He has to be elected in the constituency. And that's exactly the system we inherited from the British after long negotiations. But what happened is that there was a bit of a dishonesty on the part of Kanu those days. They said, fine, we'll accept all these conditions in Lancaster House, but then we'll check them when we come to power. And they did that.
And that is walking away from the Westminster system.
They walked away from the Westminster system completely. And that was a divide between what was called the big tribes and the small tribes. The Luos and the Kikuis came together.
Okay.
In the name of Jaramogi and Kenyatta and Mboya and all the rest were there, Gichuru and the rest of them. So the idea was basically, look, let's take these ones. We need to quench our thirst first of all before we go to the rest of these other people we can dispense with.
Okay.
Dispensables, smaller tribes.
Okay.
And that's why Kadu came in, and that's why all these people they tried to gravitate. But and then multipartyism was killed immediately. Now, if you get into a situation in which you have an executive president, by the way, who runs for elections, and then nominates an executive prime minister.
As is the case currently proposed by the BBI.
Yes, the case country proposed by BBI.
Okay.
I'm telling you, there is going to be a problem in this country. And it will end more or less into some kind of a serious chaos, because the chances that some people will be consigned into a permanent underclass, and there's going to be a state capture by one or two communities, three communities. And the idea is that I have sufficient votes from them, so why should I spend money on the other side? I can only appeal to these people. You see how the politicians use tribalism and ethnicity and regionalism and the rest of it to try and garner votes. But here you have votes courtesy of 2, 3, 4 big tribes. If you put the Luos and the Kikuyus and the Luyas together, that constitutes a majority, over 50%. You get my point?
Yes.
They don't need anybody else.
Okay.
So the point I'm trying to say is that, but if you have a parliamentary system, then everybody needs everybody else.
Okay.
And then we can have it in a mix. I know there are those who are complaining that they want to redo again the constituency things and everything, and went into some kind of a digital genocide by eliminating all the population of Northeastern Province and the rest of it, with an idea that if this becomes a system, then maybe we'll have sufficient constituencies. We'll have constituencies that
okay.
go from here to what you call the shopping center, which is only about maybe half a kilometer away. Now that we don't want also. You see, there has to be complete honesty. There has to be fiduciary to the Kenyan concept itself. Kenya as a nation, as a one indivisible entity and a single constituency.
Okay.
And then we go and look for all other things so that we can maintain our relevance and represent things, but represent populations. So if we're going to have a good conversation, sincere, honest conversation, which is always lacking, by the way, let me tell you.
Okay, it seems to be also, I want to bring out this particular point, still on you, before I come to Senator Pokisho, about the concern equally expressed by the other end of the political divide, and President Uhuru Kenyatta having the hard task here in terms of dividing the attention between one camp in his party that is opposed to the entire BBI, singling out Raila Odinga as perhaps being the stumbling block to Deputy President William Ruto, and they have a specific focus on 2022 elections. And then there's the president who here wants Kenyans to be united and the country glued together for posterity purposes. How does he divide the attention in between them, in regard to the trust, loyalty aspect that comes with
we were here. Yes. Well, all you need to do is that there has to be a complete patriotism in this country. I mean, people have to get off that tribal, horse.
Okay.
You know the president of South Africa now?
Yeah,
do you know what community he comes from? He's a vendor. It's the smallest ethnic community in that place. I think they're the smallest ethnic community in the whole of South Africa.
So was the former Ethiopian Prime Minister, Haile Mariam Desalegn, who came from a community with 1
million. He was a
Walaita,
which is also by far less than that. And so basically what I'm trying to say is that we will have, Benjamin Disraeli became the Prime Minister of the UK, a Jew, by the way, let me tell you, in that 18th century, when of course you remember the progression into the Holocaust, which happened in Germany, was basically more or less a very perverse feeling in the whole of Western Europe.
So parliamentary system.
But then here was somebody who was a Jew. People had all sorts of, and he came in as the Prime Minister. In the last, if you remember, sometimes not too long ago, in UK, there were two brothers who were running, who ran for the leadership of the
Conservative Party?
No, of the Labour Party. of the Labour Party, the two brothers who follow one another, and they were the two top candidates, best candidates who ran against one another. And the immediate one who handed over to Corbyn, before Corbyn, the man who was there. He lost terribly bad, and then he decided to give it. Do you know how many Jews are there in the whole of UK? Less than 300,000. And that's basically how it is. We want to have a country where you are judged by the content of your mind, the content of your character itself, and the beliefs that you have, but not with the ethnicity that you have, whereby you say, because I come from this ethnic community, is the biggest one. It has to have always a
so
CEO.
sort of the privilege that comes with the number of the ethnic,
It's not a corporate entity in which the biggest shareholder always provides what they call the CEO.
Okay, Senator Pogijo, even as the president and the opposition chief continue to midwife this particular coming together in the name of the handshake when they, reconcile at the doorsteps of Harambee House, the most important element here is about the country. Kenya is agenda #1 for them. But there are divisions, and the main question remains as to how they can bridge all these divisions and have a country that's united, cohesive, going forward. And to be specific here, the specifics here I'm talking about is the division in the ruling Jubilee Party. How does the president address that, even as we go forward to what appears to be a politically sane environment in 2022?
Well, let's look at it this way. There are two main houses that want to merge, or families that want to merge. The problems within one family have to be sorted out within that family. But the idea that Kenya, the various families in Kenya must come together. And Uhuru Kenyatta carries one family and Raila Odinga carries the other. Let's just imagine them to be like families. The doldrums we're talking about are within one house, and they can be sorted out within that one household. The President Uhuru has a curious task of dealing with the one problem. And I think, one of the problems is dealing with absolutism in politics. Usually, if a president is running a second time, he has a guaranteed chance of being the candidate of that party. But the mistake that Jubilee made is trying to create a situation where you already know a candidate many years ahead for the next election, who is not even a running president, a sitting president. And that really is created the problem. Those assurances are within Jubilee. They should not affect the rest of Kenya. And so if there are changes in the way we want to think and dream about our country, a peaceful country, those become very minute problems. Although we want to blow them out of proportion, really they become very small problems because they are within. It's a storm in a teacup. There are many other cups. Okay. So we want to think about this as a problem that can be sorted, and if they fail to sort it out, it will probably, the only thing that it can do is probably slow down the process of uniting or the BBI. And I like to ask at this point that those people within Jubilee need to consider that this thing has gone beyond Jubilee as a party. It's a national issue now. And they must now swallow their pride, come together as Jubilee, move in that direction, but with the aim of agreeing with the rest of Kenya that we're coming together. And so I do understand and sympathize with the president, because that is one big problem that is there, that you have a candidate who has already considered himself a front runner before the party, the National Delegates Conference or anything like that.
Yes, to nominate.
To nominate. And so those are the issues that are within Jubilee. Jubilee then must return that structure back to a place where you say to select a candidate is a different process. And you can't, there's no country in the world guarantees a candidate ahead of time, unless that candidate is a sitting president, which is usually the case.
And specifically you're talking about the DP William Ruto, isn't it? I'm
talking about Jubilee candidates, yes.
Okay. So far, he's the one who said that he's running for the presidency in 2022, and that if in the event another person is nominated by the party, he will stand, of course, to support him. Professor Mugambi, there is a concern on the conduct of the political establishment. If we go for a referendum and then we have a parliamentary system of governance, say, that happens and is in effect, then how does it embolden political parties who have been expressing or showing some concerns which ended up dotting negatively in terms of the reputation of the political establishment in the country?
One of those things which a parliamentary system does or can do in Kenya is that it will bring strong political culture into the country. Because if you look at what we've been having since independence, and more recently, Political parties have been formed as vehicles for accessing power. Just that's all. After elections, we really do not have any political parties.
And the Jubilee Party
let's
seems
just
to be
look at
that way. Okay.
not even been heading. It has been heading. It has been there since elections. Ask yourself: have you ever had one PG from the ruling party itself?
No, since 2017,
We've
no.
not had. So, I mean, what is that a political party?
And the consultative meeting was equally
it has
called
never
off.
had. Two. Have you ever had the ruling party having meetings in the counties, you know, in the communities, to popularize itself, to recruit members, to do what other political parties are supposed to do in readiness for any eventuality, any election or whatever? You have never had. And so are many other political parties, briefcase or otherwise. So I think political parties can gain a lot, and our political culture will improve better if we have a parliamentary system, because the focus will then be in parliament, as it were. And in terms of strength, the Prime Minister, for example, will be about the members of parliament who you have. The Prime Minister himself will be an MP. And therefore, the Prime Minister will be the one whose strength in parliament will be, you know, as many MPs as possible, or a coalition of the same. And this then makes those political parties to be involved in political activities every other time, and to have even what we lack in this country, which is actually party discipline. Because party discipline is not exhibited in this country, because political parties are just used during elections and they disappear after elections. And so after elections, we do not have people ascribing or subscribing to any political ideals, because those political parties have not even grown. So that if you ask today, all those parties we have, even these major parties, if you started asking Ayub what they ascribe to, or what their aspirations are, or what their philosophies are, at least we were talking about Kanu here the other day. At least we knew peace, love, and unity, you know, for all this long, and, you know, it kept the country. But if you started asking most of these political parties and what their philosophies are, what their visions are, what their values are, what they hold dear, you will just find that nobody knows about those political parties. Forget about the names themselves.
The clear absence of ideologies and policies.
At all, they do not have. So, and that is the biggest problem we have. The speaker here has just talked about bringing the country together and thinking about the country in critical times. How do you think about the country in critical times if the political culture is absent, and if the ideals do not exist? It is parties which move people who are members to those ideals. Then when we talk about loving our country, being patriotic, those are supposed to be parties, party ideals which move people towards those directions. So I think it is high time, with this opportunity we've been given, to shape our political culture and our politics in this country, to ensure that parties do not just roam around like kiosks which are used, and the next day you go and find the kiosk is not available. Okay. Yes.
Before I go to the front page of the Daily Nation, which equally is a highlight of the continuing investigation into the office of the Deputy President William Ruto into the fake military tender about 39 billion Kenya shillings, let me seek the last sentiments of Honorable Farah Maalim in effect to that and the parliamentary system of governance, and how it will restore some form of political sanity as we finish up.
Yes, yes. I mean, both my co-panelists put it here very well. One thing I can tell you, by the way, the two brothers who ran against one another are Ed Miliband and David Miliband.
Yeah, Ed Miliband, yes.
Yes, Ed Miliband and David Miliband. And they're two brothers. They followed one another, even in Bath. And you see, these were the two brightest and the most popular persons in the party. And the party settled on them. Imagine two brothers from the same mother in Kenya here, and the country is saying...
We also have George Johnson and Boris Johnson in the Conservative Party.
Absolutely. Yeah. You have Johnson, the two Johnsons in the Conservative, whose ancestry is Turkish, by the way, for your information.
And born in the United States.
And who had an American citizenship up until the other day. You understand my point? Up until the other day. So basically what I'm trying to say is that we either choose to become a nation in the real sense of the nation and compete with the best nations in the world, or we decide to live in some kind of a past and say that we are a traditionalist and we are living in this, either Middle Ages or some kind of some kind of a very, whatever you want to call it. And at some stage disintegrate, because then we'll disintegrate into our small own cocoons. We'll have the Somali nation, the Kikuyu nation, the Kalenjin nation, the Kisi nation. We'll all go in our separate ways if we don't begin thinking seriously about statehood. Statehood is, most states it's an evolution. It's of a period of time when there's you unify a country and you bring people together through wars and all sorts of things. It's not through conquest. And then when you come together now, you come with common values. People don't know the history very much of America, but America is what it is right now because of the first 13 states that came together. The 13 states that came together.
Which equally mutated into the 50 that we have.
Into the 50 that we have. Everybody was willing to join in. You see, that's why I'm telling you right now, if you don't get out of that, for example, I'll give you a simple example.
Okay.
Ethiopia is moving fast towards that. And if you're not careful, they will be the country, the focal point in this part of the world, and maybe the whole of sub-Saharan Africa, because they're getting over that. They're getting over that.
With the vibrant Abiy Ahmed.
They're not extremely vibrant, full of charisma, very visionary, doesn't want to dwell on petty things here and there and that basic insecurities here and there that one feels, or my community, or myself, or my wealth. No, he has no wealth at all, so to speak, nothing. And right now he's reaching out to the region, and he has already robbed in the whole region.
The Horn of Africa Alliance.
Yes. For example, I'll tell you, there's a historical issues between Somalia on the one hand and Ethiopia and Kenya on the other hand because of the disputed regions that were there sometimes back. And of course, it's been an unwritten rule that part of that, which was crafted between Haile Selassie and Kenyatta, was that we'll do everything we can to disintegrate the state that's left behind, and we'll keep, basically, for fear that if it becomes very strong, then it will come and attack and reclaim, which of course movements were done towards that. Right now, Abiy says, sorry, I'm out of that. I don't see any problems between Somalia and Ethiopia. I actually see a big potential of the two countries integrating into one, in one way or the other, at least economically and the rest of it. So he's seeing way beyond that. He's not fixated on the old things of trying to use, for example, look at issues of terrorism. Well, you ask yourself, why don't you have a lot of terror attacks in Ethiopia? Ask yourself that.
Well, much has been attributed to the strong, cohesive
society. No. Let me tell you one thing. There is absolutely no cohesive society in Ethiopia. It's now becoming cohesive before that. And there is no control. There is far less presence of the center in the periphery of the whole of Ethiopia than you have in Kenya here. At least in Kenya, you will see a soldier everywhere in the borderline, right from Vanga to near Lamu. Past Lamu. Not there at all. But the psyche, the psychology has changed. The philosophy has changed. So the people are getting ownership right now. You'll be surprised. All those communities that wanted to secede from Ethiopia are fighting for the unity of Ethiopia, for information. I don't know if you noticed that. They are fighting for the unity of Ethiopia. The Somalis are fighting for it. The Afars are fighting for it. The Gumbus are. These were people who were seen as second-class citizens before. And he has changed the whole psyche. Do we have people who have that kind of a capacity to make forget about the periphery and the ones who are in the frontiers? Even in the center, we have a problem. Up until a short while ago, the Luos did not feel being fully part of Kenya because of what was done to them since independence. So what we need right now is a change in the psychology, in the way we internalize our nationhood and our statehood. And if we can do that, we're going very far. And that can be reflected. There is an opportunity now. We have had so many opportunities, but we blew up all the original.
We have an opportunity now.
We have now a golden opportunity
through this BBI.
to read through this BBI, to do the unimaginable, and for this country to take off with what you call escape velocity. You know what I mean? Go all the way to the top.
And of course, we await how that is going to be having an effect in terms of the rise to the stratospheric political heights in the country, socially and equally economically. On the front page of the Daily Nation, this is what we have. If we can have that up on air, in regard to the more arrests that loom in the fake gun tender probe, and with focus with the DCI now turning their attention on the office of the Deputy President, William Ruto. And before we go on break, I'd like to seek the sentiment of Senator Pogijo in regard to that. Some have called for the resignation of the DP, some have called for him stepping aside for investigations to be concluded. And there is a concern about, and are you equally concerned, of Kenya becoming a place where dodgy deals and dodgy businesses are made? And perhaps this might put our reputation globally at stake.
Well, first of all, if we are ever going to get rid of corruption in this country, integrity from the leadership must be the key. And the way we select our people and elect our people, you know, if leaders get to the point where they don't care what happens to the country, and we saw from the day that Echesa was appointed minister, you know, he was presented as a person with absolutely no credentials. But the corruption that is there, the amount of resources poured to make him a minister, to pass through the process, you wonder what the interest is in somebody who doesn't have a qualification at all, in being pushed to become a minister in Kenya. And so when you have that kind of, it just goes to show you that these are your deep friends, okay? These are friendships. And I've said this before. In government, you don't have to be made up of comrades and your friends and buddies. You know, one of the problems that has come to this country is when we have what you call camaraderie, where people basically feel like Farah Mohammed and myself, he is the president, and I can call him names, I can talk to him the way I want because of friendship. You never run a government that way. Even if we're two brothers, we want to run government the way it is designed to be run. Okay, professionally. And that's basically what you should have been. If Farah Mohammed if Farah Maalim is not able to fit a particular position, I don't have to push him to that position. So anyway, what I see in this case is that, and I heard this the other day from a majority leader. He said if it walks like a duck and quacks like a duck and looks like a duck, then it's a duck. And I think he ended his matter right there for us to understand.
Murkomen or?
It was Murkomen.
Okay.
And so in this particular case, it's a duck. It's a duck. I mean, if a deal was cut here, right here in this studio, there's no reason why you cannot be included in the investigation.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I mean, if we sat around this table, or even in that corner, you would still be part of the investigation.
Okay.
Even if I came for 10 minutes or 20 minutes.
It doesn't matter.
It doesn't matter.
Okay.
you know, just to add to what...
Briefly, because we're going on break.
Yes, just to add to what...
or we come back because, because of the commercials. And equally, I'll engage Professor Ezra Mugambi. But first of all, before we do that, we have another important panel back from home. And Elista's calling us from the county of Nairobi. Good morning.
Good morning, I'm Mr. Aibu.
Good morning to you. Habari asubuhi.
Nzuri sana.
Talk to us.
I also wish to join my senior guys there.
Okay, go ahead, please.
Who are talking about the BBI and the inclusivity talk. I wish to tell them that we need to change our narrative because we are making this country a helpless nation.
Okay.
We do not recognize people who do business in our country. We are focusing on politics, forgetting that all other Kenyans need jobs. We need to get an environment of business. And how I wish that is they could be discussing the things that have made politicians to take unfair advantage over other Kenyans. Because everybody is thinking on how he or she can join politics. If all of us, we talk about inclusivity, because all of us want to join politics because there is benefit there. It is not that there is a call for us to serve the country. Okay. And if you see the BBI is focusing on how to fix political scores. Okay. They are not interested with Kenyans. That is why you see the report they released. It actually had nothing to do with Kenyans. We need a conversation that will lead us to be a country of prosperity where we'll organize business, professionals. If you see the benefit that the politicians are enjoying, right now even Kenyans are even neglected. They cannot think of pursuing their education because once you become a politician, you can be rich, you can take advantage of business and everything. So we want a country whereby citizens are given equal opportunity. And equal opportunity will not be realized if we accumulate all the benefit to politicians. We want to know if we have an MCA. An MCA is supposed to be in a job group the same as that of primary teacher. But the primary teacher is being paid like 20,000, and I find an MCA is getting like as much as 350. That is what we call social injustice.
Okay, asante sana listeners from the county of Nairobi, and the number is 0791478990. The hashtag on Twitter is NewDayKE. The short SMS code is 40920. We are coming back with the discussion after the break here on New Day Kenya. Welcome back. You're watching the program, and we are back with the discussion before we cross over to matters that pertain the judiciary in regard to the cash-strapped judiciary that is set to meet the JSC, to be specific, the Judicial Service Commission today, and notwithstanding, of course, the other important matter that regards the retirement of Chief Justice David Maraga, the Supreme Court, which is apparently shut by two judges, Jackton Ojwang and Philomena Mwilu, who faces a case in court and is set to appear before the Judicial Service Commission, and Ojwang, who is set to go for retirement. But before we go into that, Professor Ezra Mugambi, the caller did mention a very pertinent point, the matter of inclusivity and the conduct of the political establishment. Even as we continue to express concern about the conduct of the establishment, he said that inclusivity is key, and the BBI appears not to be attentive on that in regard to making the country inclusive. What's your take on that?
I think the caller is making a fair assessment of the current situation. But I think the BBI, if you read, and I'm just happy to see that
there's a report.
There's a report in today's
English,
both in Swahili and English, so people can be able to read. But one of the major issues within the report is actually how to make inclusivity a reality. And I think the task force is also welcoming, comments and suggestions on how to improve on that. And I think Callistas can do well if he can give his suggestions as to how we can improve on what he has just said. For example, he has just said that the most important or profitable business in Kenya is politics.
Politician, yeah.
Yeah, he's saying that politicking and politics has become a serious business in this country. So how do we do that? By ensuring that we work on professionalism.
Okay.
He gave an example of a teacher who earns very little vis-a-vis.
Let me just pause you,
yes,
because I need to pick this call from Peter equally, then we can continue. I'll give you your time to finish up. Yes, Peter, good morning. We have lost him. Fortunately, then he's going to be getting back, hopefully, I'm sure. Yes, go ahead, please.
He gave an example of a teacher who earns very poorly in comparison to an MCA who earns, what he talked about, around 350,000. And in terms of making politics a business, that is the example he gave. But that can actually be looked at if we look at BBI, and inclusivity is one of the major issues actually dealt with, and it can be improved. But why have we reached this sorry state of affairs in this country? I've said one of those things is that our political culture has been wrong, and our politics has been played along ethnic and majoritarian kind of structure. And so how do we improve on that? If we include everyone, and this is what BBI is doing, by ensuring that it looks and works on how to ensure everybody is included in the governance structure of this country. And by so doing, if we make structures like parliament, for example, if we look at what a parliamentary system can do, it will check on that compared, for example, to a pure presidential system, where the representatives then will discuss these issues in parliament. And parliament then becomes both the producer of the prime minister, in that sense, if you want. Then, at the same time, it checks on the prime minister, because the prime minister is answerable, and he's an MP, and he's going to be answering questions every week.
Absolutely.
And such issues then will be presented in parliament and discussed by the representatives of the people.
Yes.
Then they become, here, MPs become more accountable. Look at what is happening right now. How does an MP become accountable? It is very difficult. So those are the things we are saying. How do we change our politics, the culture of politics we have in this country? But if we do that, then we'll be able to answer all these questions, because the representatives, who are the MPs, will become more accountable to the people than what we have now, where once somebody has been elected, and that's why it's a business. That's all. Until 5 years end, then We talk about looking for money
to be
able to be elected
again.
Okay. You see, that's different.
And then the cycle
continues.
Two things.
Just as you couple it up, equally the point of the DCI now focusing its attention on at the office of the DP William Ruto, which appears to be the focal point here of investigation in regard to the fake military tender.
Look, I want us to have a country that has the best practices. And for a country to have the best practices, the most important thing is authority with responsibility. That's why we want somebody who's head of the government and who's accountable, because the sovereignty of the country resides with the masses through their own elected representatives in parliament. You want somebody who can be responsible to the country or responsible to the nation and the Kenyans on that floor, and you can watch him on the TV as he or she answers pertinent questions. Let me tell you, the parliament that Kenyans remember best is the 10th parliament.
Yes, which you served as the deputy.
Which I served as the deputy president.
Deputy speaker.
Sorry, I was
as it were in parliament.
As it were in parliament. As the deputy speaker. I don't think I've had such a satisfaction in the transaction of public business as we've had in that parliament that time. Because nobody is above the law, nobody is below the law. I remember kicking out of the house 6 ministers in one day. 6 ministers, because they did not come with satisfactory answers for Kenyans. I watched yesterday Speaker Muturi ordering the Education Minister, IG and TSC. I was very happy. I was impressed with that. To appear before this committee and to show cause why certain actions in Parliament cannot be taken against them, including censure motions, which of course that's the consequence that comes. Because you cannot have a whole part of the country shut down because of insecurity. And then I watched my good friend Kobia out there saying, and I have my problems with that, and even my relative Haji, saying that it's also the responsibility of the people to protect the teachers, the local community, and to be there, because these people, my friend, we don't have a security machinery that you can, Haji knows very well, we don't have a security machinery that you can report to things and can take an action. You tell them these are the bandits here, they will go in the opposite direction. And before long, those bandits know who is the one who fingered them, and they come and kill you. They come and slaughter you. And Haji knows that just too well. Just too well. He knows that.
As a provincial commissioner.
Not only that, he comes from the community. He knows that very well. Yes. And I just couldn't believe it, because my elder brother must come again out into the open and say things as they are, so that the government which will listen to him, because he's a senior person in the system here now, should be told the right things so that they can take the right steps. You cannot go after Al-Shabaab. By the way, Al-Shabaab is becoming a government in northern Kenya right now. It is the government in northern Kenya. While
weakening in Somalia.
It's weakening in Somalia. It's becoming stronger in Kenya. And I have already been told they have started taking animals and money and everything from taxes from Kenyans. And the Kenyans are scared, because if you don't, they slaughter you on the spot. And you don't have a security machinery that you can run to. You can only chase them on foot and go into every kichaka they go in themselves. Not by having, but I'm coming to exactly your main question. We got to be distracted. On the issue of the Deputy Prime Minister, the Deputy President, and what happened in his office. Look, the idea of resigning from a position, the idea of resigning from an executive position, a position you hold in the country, is such that your office does not unduly influence the investigations that are taking place. That power and authority, which is revered by everybody, is basically is no longer there. Is no longer there to intimidate the investigators. If I were my brother, as a matter of fact, I would have resigned. I'll tell you one thing. I know Kenyans are shocked when they hear that, but I would have resigned. The mere fact that somebody who I was very close to, I was responsible, singularly responsible for appointing him into the government, is involved in this mega scandal, And this scandal itself is just as bad as drugs in the country, because I have a relative who was taken to office of the president, taken to the boardroom there, signed a contract which was fake, and later on everything disappeared. You know, the people have started using offices for such things.
A lot happened.
A lot happened.
When you get to the office of the presidency.
Yeah, so in regard to the office of the president, what I have expected him to do is step aside and say, conclude the investigations. I'm going to take a rest. Let him go for a holiday. Yeah. Let the investigations be concluded. And if he's going to be vindicated, then he comes back to his office and runs it and continues with his own political aspirations and continues. But right now, as things stand, it is bad. Okay. It is murky, it is dirty, and it can only take him down further and further. You see, sometimes when you get your 2 feet into some kind of a quicksand, what you call quicksand, don't try and remove them at the same time. Yeah. Try slowly remove one at a time. Otherwise, you'll sink deeper and deeper into it, and eventually you'll drown in the mud.
Okay.
Now, the other bit that he was talking about, and I like the way he put it, a country. Look at all the developed countries. Do you know the best paying jobs in the developed in Japan? Teaching, nursing, police officer. Police officer is the area that everybody wants to be recruited. The top students do not go for medicine, political science, and they go for teaching. You see what I mean? Because it's the best paying job.
Okay.
And right now, look at the way we have reversed. We have completely overturned our value system.
It's upside down.
Those are the three, you know, the jobs that nobody wants to go for unless he has no other option. You understand my point?
I get you. Okay.
So you have a procurement officer who sits out there and just picks up papers from the people and takes 5% or 10% from every contract that's there, and it keeps on building up. You know, the one we had in NHIF sometimes back, and basically flies with a chopper.
Okay.
And you have a teacher, poor teacher, who's earning 20,000, 30,000 shillings and gets killed by bandits. You know what I mean?
The foundation
without an insurance for him.
Okay.
So we have to get our value system right. If we don't get our value system right, then it doesn't matter. And by the way, let me tell you, people talk about growth of economy.
Okay, briefly.
You can grow your economy by just having 3 multinationals doing very well and exporting to the neighboring countries. You get my point? 3, 4 you have Safaricom, you have
Coca-Cola.
3, 4 big companies, big outfits. And if you can grow their business to a neighboring country in a big way, because GDP is basically all services and products and goods in a country.
All right.
But you might think it's like China, for example. People think China is extremely rich. You still have about 400 million people who are living in a third world level in abject poverty. You see what I mean?
That's in China, okay.
That's in China. So basically what we're looking at right now, we have a population that is very well educated, that is very well skilled, that does not have jobs. We have master's degree holders who are going back now to look for tertiary colleges to go and learn electrician, how to basically, because you can get
to secure a job,
secure some kind of a living.
Okay. Now, there's also another important development in the country, and this is in regard to the third arm of the government, the judiciary, and here is what we have on page 4 of the Daily Nation. If we can have that up on here. Mato, is it available? Yes. The Judicial Service Commission is set to hold a meeting amid looming judiciary crisis over lack of judges. This is in regard to President Uhuru Kenyatta, who rejected the confirmation of 41 judges already cleared by the Judicial Service Commission. This, of course, is happening at a time when there are concerns on the rollout of justice across the country, with the judiciary now saying that services across courts in the country will be officially crippled. This is as per the statement issued by the Judicial Service Commission Chair and equally the President of the Judiciary, David Maraga. Coming to you, Senator Pogigio. It's good that independent institutions thrive in a democratic society. More important is interdependence among state institutions that ought to be independent. I'm talking about the judiciary, the executive, and the lawmaking organ, which is Parliament. In this particular case, do you see the clear blue line water here polluted in regard to one arm undertaking its functions? Because judiciary, in terms of dispensation of justice, is equal as important as the executive and Parliament, which play a crucial role in the setting up of a country.
Here is a danger. If you look at independent commissions and independent institutions, you basically have a culture You know, these are new institutions. By the way, independence in this country of institutions is very new. And when we became independent in terms of institutions, constitutional institutions, for example, we did not then take on the learning of new cultures that go with these new developments. You know, even if you're placed in a class, you have to learn a culture of that class. One of the problems is that with independence comes a lot of money and control of money and resources. And very soon there's an appetite to either increase salaries, there's an appetite to increase personnel and hire people. Until now, you almost want to have a judge for every village. And you know, even rich countries, by the way, don't have a judge in every ward or county. You know, they have what you call circuit judges and circuit courts and things like that. And so what happens really is that when we give an institution money, they now have an appetite to grow themselves into big people and create more offices and create a lot of all these things that now are becoming difficult to attain. So who is going to police those organizations? Who is going to police? Somebody has to come. Otherwise, we're going to run out of money. Every commission who wants to have their own way of doing things, they want to have their own monies and increase every year. And now they're demanding, by the way, everybody's demanding. We want a cake bigger. And yet, none of them participates in the baking of the cake. We're a consuming society. And I think that's where we need to go back to. How are we all going to be responsible for this cake coming back to the table? And then we can divide it. So I'm actually afraid that every time we create new commissions, we are not learning cultures about how those commissions should run. And there's no policing of those institutions. But anyway, that's the way we go. Now everybody is going to say, give us more money. Parliament, when I went to Parliament many years ago, our salary was about 10,000 shillings. 1988? In 1988, 10,000 shillings. You didn't have a car. You couldn't get anything. You had to actually take a loan, a bank loan.
At commercial rates.
At commercial rates to be able to drive. I mean, life was about your leadership being offered. But because
it was sacrifice, it was a calling.
Yeah, because now you have created a situation where there's an appetite for everything. And it's not only in Parliament, it's every commission now. So I think we better have a great look at how commissions are actually consuming what we have rather than putting in more into the cake.
Okay, Professor Mugambe, welcome to you, Honorable Farah. The issue which is important here, which is so paramount, is the aspect of wanting to have an independent judiciary to dispense justice, because that's important for all Kenyans. But equally, within the House, within the framework of the House, are other problems equally, which are internal, and the judiciary needs to have the intra-communication, root out corruption, address integrity issues, bad behavior among the judges. And there is the Supreme Court judge, which concerned the ruling on the Wajir gubernatorial petition, which qualified the election of Governor Mohamed Abdi Mahmoud at the High Court level, at the Court of Appeal level, which upheld the High Court ruling. But the Supreme Court said in its majority judgment that the governor never had a degree, but he behaved like someone with a degree. So how will you root out all these problems?
It looked like someone.
Anyway, I think we've got to be a bit serious about the way we play our politics. And judicial independence is good. But judicial independence also goes hand in hand with judicial accountability. And here is the problem. Who ensures, how do we ensure judicial accountability? All these things we are talking about and judicial issues, you know, performance, abrogation of roles, perhaps, which sometimes do not look like they are their roles, accountability in terms of financial prudence, the way the judges work, their own work ethic. For example, you know, if you ask me, we have, in Kenya, we have anti-corruption courts.
Yep.
But how long do cases take in those courts?
And we have a lot of cases,
And we have a lot of cases
at the moment.
In fact, the other day, the Chief Justice was saying that it is going to take even longer to adjudicate over these cases. And here comes the challenge. You are asking for more money to be able to perform, while you are saying, actually, going forward, these cases are going to take long. So, I mean, what is the function? Somebody can just ask, what is the function of this judiciary if they cannot even perform and they're asking for more money? What this means is that we got to look more closely, as Senator has just said, got to do with independence and performance of the judiciary. In fact, I looked through the performance of the judiciary and the reports which they have been giving every other periodically, and I have seen that as we move along, case pile-ups have been the order of the day than dispensing justice. And I just saw the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi saying, as it were, you know, when cases are delayed, of course, justice is denied. So the judiciary in Kenya has to sit down and see how to, within a presidential system, because within a parliamentary system, it works differently, how they are going to perform their roles more underlined efficiently within limited financial resources.
Okay.
What does that mean? It means that the judicial system has to be overhauled. We have to look at their work ethic. We have to look at the culture within that system. We have to see loopholes which challenge their effectiveness. And this effectiveness actually doesn't have to do with the finances which they are given. If you go to court, like today, if you go to most of those courts, you will be there at 10 o'clock, and a judge has not arrived at 10 o'clock. But that judge will be away in the next 1.5 hours. At 11:30, at 12, they have left.
And you might have,
and they will be coming
at
at 3. They will come to adjourn. They just come and say, this case in the next 2 months. And that's all. Here, and give dates, and then move away, and then come back at 2:30, stay for 1 hour, then move away, and then again. So I think there's a problem with the performance. While, as the caller Kalista said, that a teacher earns very little, you can actually account. The teacher can actually account for his hours. But who accounts for the way judicial officers or the judges work? Nobody accounts for that.
And that remains the main point here, which is equally important. Honorable Farah Maalim, coming to you. Despite the decree by many Kenyans about the sort of exogenous pressure piled upon the judiciary by the executive, I mean, the sort of the Wakora network, and we had that at the repeat of the presidential elections in 2017. It's equally a global affair when you look at a society like the United Kingdom, where the judges who sat in Edinburgh and called the prorogation of the House of Commons unlawful were termed as enemy of the state or the people, and later that judgment was upheld by the Court of Appeal, which sat in London. 11 judges of all said, or upheld rather, the ruling by the court in Edinburgh. I mean, well, that is acknowledgeable. It's sort of the can fall within the framework of the freedom of expression because we are a democracy. How do we then perhaps root out the other important elements of even judging the independence of the judge who issues the judgment? I mean, how do we balance all that, which is important?
You see, we went through some serious lengths to try and clean up our system. The judicial system in the country, the justice. You remember when the first time Moi left the scene and Kibaki came in, there was a Ringera Commission.
Justice Aaron Ringera.
Justice Aaron Ringera. And many judges and magistrates, their names were basically in the public domain as not being that level of integrity to warrant them to execute the kind of jobs they're supposed to execute. Then we went again to independence of the judiciary itself, and we brought in, enacted the legislative, what they call the constitutional provision of the Supreme Court itself to handle, other than advisory role, but to handle all these other things and petitions. Progressively to where we are today. And we have a situation right now in which I have seen myself, I'm a victim of that.
You filed a petition.
It is a den of corruption. It is bad. But let me tell you something. And it's the most corrupt institution. And in any country, look at the justice system. If the justice system is rotten, the country is rotten. Because that is the final habitat. That is when everything else is lost, the place you go and seek refuge. And if you can't get that refuge there, and justice is only for the highest bidder, the person who pays the most. Somebody was telling me about a case of a judge who was given money, and he's a very prominent person who is himself also a legal mind, and came back to the same guy and said, look, I've been paid better than you, so I can't put this judgment in your favor. Take back your money.
In other words, it's materialism.
In other words, it's saying that, look, somebody has outbid you.
The highest bidder.
The highest bidder gets justice.
Somebody has outbid you. Your opponent has outbid you. And that, by the way, goes for lawyers. Advocates are the worst in this thing. The whole process, the whole system is rotten. There's no question about that. But having said that, one thing that Willy Mutunga, one person that you can always say is an honest and a clean man, somebody who can never be associated with anything. He's been part of that, the collective Supreme Court judgment where they did not want to show any dissent because they thought that was going to bring problems in the country in that initial first ruling of the petition, presidential petition in 2013. And I'm told in that he was a dissenter himself, but then you could not show dissent.
As chair.
Yeah?
Yep.
You could not show dissent, but the majority of them were paid.
Okay.
The rest of them were paid. This is the impression I'm given. Most of them were paid. So he has taken justice to the four corners of this country. He has posted judges. He has built courts. He has posted magistrates. And if you have to seek your own justice in Mandera before justice, you either have to come here, Nairobi, to the High Court in Nairobi, or Meru.
Now they are magistrates.
Now they are judges now. The judges in there. Even Garissa did not have a judge before Willy Mutunga, provincial headquarters out of the 7 provinces we had in the country that time. And the Nairobi extraterritorial, we didn't have a judge there. But right now we have judges in the 4 corners of the country. We have magistrates everywhere. And then look at the other aspect of it. If you cannot have sufficient magistrates to dispense justice and sufficient judges, then you'll have a backlog of prisoners, which is more costly now. If you're going to have 200,000 prisoners in our jails and prisons, what is the cost? Now, the flip side of this,
You work for an hour.
15 billion is what they had for a budget. I think is that 15 billion for the judiciary.
For the slash was about after slashing 15 billion. Yep.
15 billion. 7,000 employees, 4 corners of the country. Go to Parliament. 1,200 employees, both houses, 45 billion.
3 times.
3 times. How do you justify that?
Number of judges, number of MPs.
Yes.
And of course, what's to be undertaken?
How do you justify
in terms
that?
of rationing the 2 budgets?
Yes.
What point are you do you want to bring out here?
I want to bring out here, look, the Westage is there, but it's not the judiciary. There is a problem in the judiciary which has to be addressed.
Equally, you are
But
also...
in terms of the provision of giving them sufficient money, resources for them to do their things, there's nothing. I have a problem with anybody who thinks that we do not, these people should not be, should have as much as this. They should have a third of what Parliament has.
Initially, they called for 31.2 about their billion.
Which I think is fair. In my opinion, that was fair. As a matter of fact, Parliament and Judiciary should have the first charge on the consolidated fund. You see what I mean?
Okay.
So basically, first and second charge. So basically, what I'm saying is that how do you justify 1,200 people, including the members of Parliament, 45 billion Kenya shillings, and 15 billion for 7,000 employees in the 4 corners of the country? And here we are in Parliamentary Square, which is what is it?
About 45 billion.
No, 2 kilometers square.
Okay.
Are we even 2 kilometers?
One less than a kilometer square.
Less.
One less than a kilometer square. And these guys are in 540,000 square kilometers we have in the country. They have a presence in every corner of this country.
Okay.
You see what I mean? So there is a serious mismatch in this. I have no problem with us looking at these things and slashing them. But for God's sake, be fair in the way you slash it. And then the other thing is that once you have a JSC which is independent, they have done their job.
You reject the already cleared judges, numbering about 40.
They have already cleared them. Mr. President, you have to be, you're not above the law. You get my point?
Yep.
They have their own issues. I want actually the Kinoti to go and investigate these people. By the way, it's very easy to bring all those judges to court. 60% of them will end up in courts and in jails. And you know what I mean?
And 80% of governors, as per the Senate,
more than 80% of the governors,
seats, yep.
more than 80% of the governors will end up in jail. Go and put these people to jail. But you see, don't try and screw up the system because there are certain bad eggs in the system. Deal with the bad eggs in the system. You see what I mean? But allow the system itself as a system to thrive. To thrive. So that, in my opinion, is basically the way I think we should deal with the judiciary in this case. Yes, the president. No, you cannot. That's an extreme measure of dictatorship. When you run afoul of the constitution itself.
Okay.
It's not right.
Sawa. And let me come to Senator Pogisho because there's equally an important concern.
Judiciary is impersonal, by the way. The judiciary.
It has to be the ample umpire.
Impersonal. You can only say the judiciary. You cannot say Maraga. You point finger at. No, it's not right.
Okay.
The court is the court. You can say the judiciary, the Supreme Court, but don't keep on fingering individuals.
Let me give the final words to Honorable Senator as we finish up and we free him because he's running for a meeting in Parliament.
Yes.
Your final closing remarks.
I think issues that we've spoken about are very pertinent. And on the issue of, and I spoke about appetites, growing appetites, we must have a culture of keeping integrity at the center of where we work. And I think that's what's missing. So that all this, but if you look at the resources, and Farah can ask, how much of that goes to wastage, wherever we add? How much of this goes to pilferage?
A lot of it.
And that is our biggest problem. So we keep saying, let's take from this cake, and we handle it in such a careless manner that most of it is dropping out of our hands.
Absolutely.
So I think I'm just appealing that while we look at what we have made as a budget, let us also see how we can cut all the wastages and what people steal. And that appetite needs to be investigated. Moderated, actually. Moderated,
Okay. I give you a brief 1 minute to finalize so that we can wrap things up here.
I also support what Senator is saying, that even as institutions which have been mandated by the Constitution and Kenyans to perform certain roles, continued doing so and asking for more funds to be able to perform their roles. I think we also need to relook at how those systems work. If there are internal challenges like the JSC has, I think we need to, and those leaders who are in charge should be the guiders to ensure that they reform, to ensure that finally they deliver on their mandate. And I think leaders in this country should be leading from the front. So that if there are challenges within the JSC, I expect Honorable Pogisho and Mheshimiwa here as well, in their own right, to be leading in terms of, because, Parliament has an oversight role as well, so that, they can propose reforms to ensure that these institutions are, perform more effectively, even as they move forward, to ensure that they have funds to be able to deliver on their mandate.
Okay, thank you so much, Professor Ezron Mugambi. I appreciate your time. Asante sana, governance political commentator. At the center is Honorable Farah Maalim, the former Deputy Speaker of the National Assembly, and Senator Samuel Pogisho, West Pokot County. Before we wrap things up, here is what we have on your screens in regards to the fears of the coronavirus. And this is according to John Hopkins global study in the case of the coronavirus, that we have so far more than 43,000 cases, 141. And the heat map here in the red shaded area is mainland China, where there are more than 37,000 confirmed cases. Outside mainland China, we have Hong Kong, Taiwan, equally in South Korea, and in Japan and in North Korea. So far, 1,018 people have died of the outbreak, about 2,000 now. This was yesterday, as per not updated yet, and 4,340 patients have recovered from the patients after medication across mainland China and equally across the world. The first confirmed case of the coronavirus in Africa was confirmed in the Egyptian capital, Cairo, and equally as Kenyan students in Wuhan are expressing concerns on the government's commitment for purposes of evacuation, as the Ministry of Treasury and the Courier Attorney says it's only waiting for a go-ahead from the Foreign Affairs Ministry in terms of the budget allocation, but the money is ready. According to Sarah Serem, the Kenyan ambassador to China, it's all a matter of prayers, and we, of course, wish them all the very best in terms of protection, and even as the city remains locked down with millions of people affected, and reportedly they're running out of foodstuff. And this is where we wrap things up here on the program, and we'll leave you with the image of the day, and we'll see you on Thursday tomorrow night. Winnie Lubembe will be here in about an hour's time. Thanks for watching. Stay tuned. Good morning.